Hello everyone, today we're going to be finishing our character rig. Now in the last video we worked on the facial rig, however your character doesn't necessarily need to have a face, so if you skip that video that's fine, go ahead and proceed. All that's really left to do is to refine our weight painting on our body to make the motions around our joints feel nice and smooth. So last time we worked on the body, we left our weight painting in a state that was all right for a first pass, but it needed some work. So our arms worked pretty well. Our feet worked pretty well for the most part, except for right here in the hip area. I'm going to turn off my textures so we can see better. So it works pretty well, except for right in here. So we need to fix that. Our chest doesn't smooth enough. This knife shouldn't be deforming with the rest of the body. I know the ears are taking the head with them. We don't want that. And, as I'm sure is probably the universal experience for everyone, the armpit is all wrong. This is probably the number one issue that everyone's going to run into, is your armpit weights are not going to be correct. So with my shirt selected, I'm going to go to my rigging shelf. And I'm going to select the tool Paint Skin Weights. It's this sort of grid looking thing with a paintbrush in the middle. It's like that. And I'm going to double click it actually to bring up the tool settings for that. Dock that tool settings wherever you like. I've docked it over to the left for now, but I might move it around later. So this tool that I've just selected, Paint Skin Weights, lets us paint in the influence of each joint onto specific vertices. So where it is black, there is no influence of a particular joint on that vertice, and where it is white, there is full influence over that vertice. And any gray area is blended between different joints. So for example, if I select my root joint, I can see the influence that my root joint has over the particular vertices on this part of the character. Navigating between objects and in and out of the Paint Weights tool can be a little confusing. So to be clear, to start painting the weights on a particular piece of geometry, first you exit out of your any tool with the Q key and you select the object you want to paint the weights of, and then you select your Paint Skin Weights tool. So those are the steps to start painting your skin weights. And if you want to, say, move a joint around, you press Q to exit Paint Skin Weights. You select that joint, do a rotation, then select your geometry again, and open Paint Skin Weights again. So from this menu, I can start painting in my weights. If I want a bigger brush, I can hold B and then click and drag to expand my brush size. And here we have 4 different paint operations. So replace will do as it says. It will replace whatever value I brush with the new value, which is selected here under value. White is the value 1 and black is the value 0. So right now I'm replacing anything I brush with the value of 1. I'm going with that. Now you notice that I'm not actually making any changes right now because my joint here is locked. So if I exit and re-enter that joint, all my changes are unsaved. So when you're working with this, you need to make sure anything you want to change is unlocked. And that includes the joints that you want to take away from. So when you are painting on vertices for a particular joint, you are taking away from other joints that have influence on it. So for example, if I have everything locked except for the chest and I paint in here, it's still not going to have any influence because these parts of the spine also are locked. So I'm going to undo all that. I'm going to unlock some of these parts of the spine. And then with chest selected, I'm going to paint in, and now you can see that influence start to set in. So that is the replace tool. There's also the add tool, which is additive rather than replacing. So if I change this to a value of 0, nothing's going to happen because I'm just adding 0. The math doesn't line up. Scale is the same, but in reverse. Basically a subtraction. And then there's smooth, which, pretty self-explanatory, it smooths out the values. It gets you sort of a gray in between. I'm going to move this back. I'm going to go back to the bind pose using advanced skeleton. I'm going to click to go to build pose. Select my geometry, go back to the paint mode. And let's say I like what I've done here. I'm going to go to the back and paint in smooth here as well. So let's say I like what I've done. I can then go up here, change my menu to the rigging set, and then go to skin, mirror skin weights. I'm going to hit the square here so I can see my options. So my left side is my negative, and my right side is my positive on the x-axis. I'm going to mirror across the y and the z. So the y and z would be up is y, and z is forward. So it's mirroring across those. So that's my x-axis. I'm going to make sure that I'm going negative to positive. So I'm going to uncheck that. So it's negative to positive. I'm going to hit apply. And now my skin weights are mirrored from one side to the other. And we can see how it looks. Rotate. That works pretty well. We'll use some adjustments, but overall it's good. It's good to make sure you're working in smooth preview mode with all these, because if not, you'll get slightly different results than the end. If you want to lock or unlock a large series of joints, right-click one joint and select Unlock Inverse Selection. And it'll unlock everything but that one joint you selected, and then you could unlock that last joint. So that's one way you can unlock every joint really quickly, and you can just repeat the same. You do Lock Inverse Selection and Lock Selected. In addition to painting by hand, you can also press the flood button. So you can flood with the replace. And now the whole thing is weighted to spine, is weighted to this one joint in the spine. But I don't want that. I'm going to undo. What flood is really good for is smoothing. So I'm going to switch my smooth operation, hit flood, hit that a couple times. I'm going to work my way down the spine. Just slowly smoothing everything out. I have a lot of extra joints in the hip because I set it up that way to have different deformers. And I can ignore the knees. It's just the shirt. So this is the drawback to having sliders, is that it does give you more weights you have to paint and be considerate of. Whereas you might find it easier to work with less joints. So sliders, if you recall in the first rigging video, these are these extra joints which move the skin around as the elbows and different joints turn. So you can see how those are working. So at this point, it is a little too late to get rid of these extra joints if I wanted to. See if I click this and hit delete. Seems to cause an issue where these weights don't really know where to go afterwards. So So yeah, at this point, it's too late to get rid of the sliders because it really messes up your skin weights. As you can see here, I seem to be missing the elbow between the shoulder and the wrist. So yeah, this is the point where you're kind of locked into those sliders. I noticed as I was moving this, it's having an effect on my shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. Go in here. I'm going to find that elbow joint that's having an effect on my shirt. Right there, it's one of these elbow sliders. So with that, I'm going to go to replace, give it a value of 0. I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint all of this. What that's going to do is it's going to distribute that weight to the other joints that have influence over this area, which in this instance is all the different segments of the spine. There we go, much better. So keep an eye out for odd influences like that because they're going to come up all the time. Here's an area where I've maybe smoothed out too much. So I'd want to go in. Check all these hip joints. Probably this hip start slider too. What I want to do is I'd probably want to come in with the higher value. Well, no, not quite. You're having really drastic changes in color. You can turn down your opacity. Just do little clicks. This is just one of those areas where it's really hard to kind of get right. You'll probably do a lot of back and forth. So I've taken that so far, but it seems like maybe I need to make a change to these pants as well. So I'm going to go in with the pants. Let's see what I can do here. To get a good grasp of what joint you're working on, you can turn on visibility for your skeleton and then select your geometry and then just isolate those pants and the skeleton together. And then I can work on the skeleton and seeing what joints I'm working on. Not sure why this joint has weights on the left side. I'm going to go and paint those out. Be sure to move your leg around periodically just to check how the weights are looking in different angles, not just the front, but when it is stretched back as well. The pants, there's always a bit of a problem with the skin kind of poking out here. So I have to do a little bit of extra work just to try and get those pants to cover up properly. Just going through all my end sliders here and just selecting one I think will be good. I'm going to do replace operation. Get your brush nice and small. You can eventually paint it just right so that it all gets covered up. Do a little smoothing if need be. I've got it pretty close, but there's one little spot that skin is still poking through, and I'm having trouble getting it quite right. I'm going to go into my joints here. I'm just going to do the skin. Turn weight painting here. I can see this can help. I'm starting at the hip. Right, start. Then hips, end slider. Okay, I'm not sure why the hips on the right have influence on the left. Go into my paint skin weights. Do replace. That's number one. Let's get rid of some of the weights on this side because it's supposed to be the right hip. You don't need any influence on the left side, my right hip. We're going to leave that one. Smooth out the flood. Passing on that. Flood. Oh, there's another one where it's a lot more on the other side than I think is meant to be. Do replace. I think it's supposed to be here. Use a softer brush if I want. The influence here. Get rid of the influence on the other side. Let's see, isolating this spot. Scale down my tool by a lot. Do the replace tool. Really, the real opacity and no value. See, we just come in here. I should turn up the value. That's what I want. And there we go. That's hidden. There's the side. Ooh, we got a problem on the side as well, though. Be sure to check all angles of your legs. With this side, let's see what the problem is. I think the problem here is more so with the pants, not the skin. Now, let's say you are working on this and you're kind of just struggling with the weight system because it can be a bit of a bother. There's more than one way you can fix some of these odd shapes, and that is with corrective shapes. If you watch my video on the face, you'll be familiar with kind of how this works. It's basically blend shapes. So basically, blend shapes are a series of alternate versions of your mesh that you sculpt yourself and then bake into your rig so that when you pose your rig in certain ways, the geometry will blend between the different blend shapes that you made, giving you a lot more control over the way your skin or clothes deform. So first what I want to do, if I'm going to do a corrective blend shape, is I'm going to isolate a single pose for that shape that I want to bake the changes into. So for my leg, I want to isolate just the leg rotating outward. Now the best way to get this leg to rotate out on just one axis would be to rotate it in FK mode. For those that are new to animation terminology, the abbreviation FK stands for forward kinematics, and the abbreviation IK stands for inverse kinematics. So what forward kinematics means is when you have a hierarchy of joints, the joint at the top of the hierarchy, when it is moved and rotated, will affect all of the joints below it in the hierarchy. And then the joint below that will affect all the joints below that, and so on and so forth. It is going forward through the hierarchy to affect the later joints. Inverse kinematics, on the other hand, takes the position and rotation of a joint further down the hierarchy and uses that to position joints in the middle of the hierarchy inversely. So you may notice that by default on the advanced skeleton rigs, when you move the foot, it will move the knee automatically. This is an inverse kinematic relationship between the joints. This is opposed to the arms, which are by default have FK motion. So the shoulders control the elbows, and the elbows control the wrists, and the wrists controls the fingers. But with advanced skeleton, both the legs and the arms can be swapped in between forward kinematics and inverse kinematics. So to swap from IK to FK mode on this leg, I'm going to select this plus-shaped controller next to the leg. I'm going to go to IK-FK blend. I'm going to change this to 0. It allows me to access the FK controls for my leg. Just like this. I'm going to rotate it out. And I think the furthest extreme for this would just be pretty much a 90-degree. Let's make that a 70-degree. And once I've done this, I'm going to isolate that in my skin. So that's all I can see. Then I'm going to make sure my pants are selected. Then here in the pose menu, under corrective shapes, I'm going to hit create corrective shape. It's going to ask me if I want to create a corrective shape from this driver. In other words, what channel I have changed. And all I have changed is the right hip at an angle of 75 degrees. I'm going to hit OK. And now see it changes me into this sculpt mode, where I can just so slightly change the shape of these pants. So here we have a couple different operations. We have a push and pull operation. We have a smooth operation, relax, pinch, slide, and erase. If you remember my Blender sculpting tutorial, this works like a very, very simple version of that. So I'm going to go to my pull tool. Just going to pull out. And I'm just trying to adjust this pant leg so that it comes out more. So I'm just going to have to kind of guess how this looks. It's way too bulged out, so I'm going to hit go to smooth. And I'm going to hit apply. We'll just see how that looks. Isolating these two selections. And there we go. That's a lot better on the direct side of the leg. There is still some parts of the back where I'm going to need to make some more adjustments though. But you can see it's an improvement for sure. I'm going to go back to my build pose. Also, something I forgot to do earlier is I forgot to mirror my skin weights. So I'm going to do that again. Just my pants selected, mirror skin weights. I don't think that should break anything. Let's take a look at this pose. Isolate, select. Oops. Isolate these controllers as well. Isolate, select. Rotate. And rotate. And you can see it's the same on both sides. I want to see if I can paint the difference here on the back, because I remember there was an issue here with some of these joints. Hit start slider. Here we go. This is the one with the weird weights. So I'm gonna add weight here. Remove weight here. Smooth out here. So now if I want to further edit my corrective shape that I already created, I'm going to go back to the corrective shapes menu. I'm going to right click, edit, not left click. I'm going to right click this button, edit. I'm going to find my pants rotation. I'm going to find that rotation I had before and select it. And it goes back to that selection and it lets me make further changes. And hit apply, see how that looks. Perfect. And it looks like it looks good on this side as well. I'm going to go back to my shirt, see what I can do with weight painting first, before I start adding corrective blend shapes to the shirt as well. I'm coming with weights, and a lot more weights. This end slider. And it gets me so far. So it looks like I've fixed it as about as much as I can using weight painting alone. So it looks like I'm going to have to use a corrective shape. So this time I'm going to leave it in that same pose, and I'm going to hit create corrective shape again, because now I'm working on the shirt. I'm going to create it from that same hip angle. And we're just going to come in, hit relax, perhaps smooth, pinch. No. I'm going to inflate it a bit. Not inflate, we're going to pull it a bit. And smooth. And relax. That looks fairly decent. I'm going to hit apply. And still a little bit of clipping, so I'm going to go back to edit. Now, interestingly, shirt isn't showing anything. I have to actually go back to my pants, and it seems I have to find that angle under pants instead to edit my shirt. This seems to be some kind of bug. Like, just keep that in mind. You might need to dig a little bit for your corrective shapes. And apply. There we go. Looks decent. It's definitely another area where you want to make a corrective shape. The shirt. That's an angle of, let's say, 70. And this one, take my shirt and create another corrective shape. And this one's a real doozy. Smooth. Try to untangle this mess here. I know it's going to prove difficult. Just using my tool, smooth tool, relax tool. Get a bigger area. There we go. So I've used my pull tool to try and expand this area. And from the back, come back with a smaller tool and try to push it back in a little bit. With my push tool. And I'm just going to try and relax all this. Smooth it out. Tune apply. Just kind of see how it looks. And it's still nowhere near what I want. Well, let's go back to edit. Still nothing for the shirt. Might all be on the pants, which is an unfortunate glitch, but what can we do? So if I want, I can actually go into vertex mode as well and just edit this mesh that way. I've got this vertex selected. I'm just going to slide it up. There we go. I'm going to go back to this painting tool. Be sure to undo any selections you might make, because then otherwise you can't paint anything but that selection. I'm going to go back to object mode. Just do a bit more relaxing. Before I hit apply. That looks a bit better. Go back to edit. Move some of this. Back down. Hit apply. So because I didn't go in and fix up the weights well enough on the front of the shirt, the corrective shape actually looks really bad as it transitions from the default pose to the blend shape. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click this delete button. And for whatever reason, it turns out that in the delete button, all these blend shapes are actually sorted correctly, so I don't need to worry about that as much because I can just find it in the shirt now. So I'm going to shirt, hip right, angle Z. Which angle is this actually? It's on the Z. Oops. On the Z, delete, shirt, hip right, angle Z. Same thing. Shirt, hip left, angle Z, position. Delete that. Clear that out. All right, so now I'm going to try the same thing again. I'm just going to take another crack at that weight painting before I do a corrective blend shape. So it's hip, right, start slider. Just flood with the smooth. I'm just doing a lot of flooding with the smooth tool. See what I can do here. Yep, I've gone overboard now. So you can see how this can be quite a push and pull. It can be really frustrating to get it just right. Let's try this one more time. Put that to 70. Do a corrective shape. Go ahead and relax this area. Once that's relaxed, I'm going to go to my vertices. Grab that, just pull it forward, rotate. And let's hit apply. This is an improvement. Let's go to edit, pants, Z position. One more time. Just grab these vertices, pull it up. And apply. Almost there. Noise out. Versi mode. Just pull up from this side. Apply. There we go. That's a pretty good shape. Yep, I'm happy with that. And I would go on and just do the same process for the back, but we've seen enough of the leg for now. I'm going to move on. Don't forget to save. Moving on to the arms. There's a whole mess of a problem going on here. So I'm just going to isolate my skin for now. Let's open this up. Find our chest. Go to replace. And just start painting that in. In that spine part too. Raise my opacity. Just be kind of mindful of the rest of your spine. Mostly aiming for the chest, but go for it all. Sure to flood with smooth when you're every now and then. Place. Smooth. Place. Sure to get your scapula involved as well. Right, scapula. So keep that in mind. Probably for right in the armpit, you want to paint that to your scapula rather than inside the chest. And once you've done some painting, collapse this and see how it feels. Now it feels like there's still some interesting influence here happening. So we want to get rid of the arm's influence on the chest completely. Let's see how else we can adjust that. Let's check our right shoulder. Shoulder part 1. And there's the culprit. Go back to our painting. So we can finish this off. Opacity 1, value 0. Paint right in here. Well, this arm, this shoulder part is selected. Definitely don't need any of that back here. And that should be good. Oh. And see when you get to this height, then you get to a bit of a problem where the top of the shoulder kind of crunches in on itself. So you need to give it some weight to work with there. I'm going to go back in here. This seems like the scapula is a little overemphasized now. So I'm going to come back into my right shoulder. I'm going to replace. Add. Doesn't need to be too much. You still want that clavicle to have an effect. Let's see. It's all right. It's an improvement. I want to smooth this all out though. That shoulder flood is smooth. Just right here. Look, the scapula goes too far down this way, so I'm gonna replace the value 0. There we go. Let's grab that scapula in the selection too. Let's grab these 2 controllers. Isolate. Realistically, you wouldn't even have your shoulder go up that high anyway. Eventually, your scapula would factor in. Yeah, and you'd raise your scapula to about there. That would look pretty good. I think right here I want to do some smoothing. Alright, and then it's the same thing with the shirt. The scapula actually seems to be pretty de-emphasized, which is interesting. So then I'm just going to start pinning in like I did before on the skin. I'm just going through, trying to get rid of all these extra weights from down the elbow and the shoulder that don't belong on the body. It seems like there's a lot of them. It looks like started to get them now. Looks like from the shoulder down, I can just flood with the value of 0, in fact. Because really what's affecting here is just the scapula. Even that. At that point, I can smooth my scapula a little bit. Come back with the chest. Smooth a bit that way. There we go. Alright, do a little bit of testing. Scapula usually wouldn't go down that far, but let's see what we can do about that. Alright. That looks pretty good. Go back to build pose. And make another save. Alright, next up I'm going to take a look at the fingers. The fingers can be a little bit tricky because they're so small. Thankfully my fingers came in pretty good, so I don't need to make a lot of changes. But I'm still going to address these. See, I kind of don't like how mushy this is. So I'm actually going to try and harden some of these weights. I'm going to go in here, go to my paint, go all the way. It's a really long way down. finally, I'll get to my right hand. I'm gonna find index finger. So one way we can work with the finger is to actually make our selections first in vertice mode and then do fills based on those selections. So I'm going to go to build pose. I'll select my finger. Go to vertice mode. I'm going to turn off my smooth preview. Just going to select some of these vertices. And then I'm going to go back to my paint skin weights. Unlock my inverse selection so that all my index finger is ready to go. So now with my index finger selected, I select the value I want and flood. And now I'm going to expand my selection by holding shift and pressing period. I'm going to hit flood again to go right up to that point, that edge. And press Q. I'm going to go back to my vertice mode. Select this edge loop. Expand that selection a couple times. Once again, that's shift and period to expand your selection. Go back to my paint mode. I'm going to select my index finger 2. Unlock that. I'm going to flood with value of 1. Now, go to smooth preview. That works pretty well. Whoops. Still a little deformation going on here. So I think it's about as good as we're going to get without making corrective blend shapes, which you could do, but it's a bit nitpicky. I'm just going to go ahead, repeat the process one more time for this portion of the finger. Index finger, hit flood. Turn my smooth. Move the finger around. Whoop. That is very peculiar. Seems that my finger has some weights on the legs. Oh, I must have accidentally selected those vertices when I was selecting my finger here. Forgetting that geometry down there. So I'm going to have to do a lot of undoing. Yep, there it is. Okay, so keep that in mind. In the future, don't forget you've got geometry back there. But otherwise, I would have done that perfectly. Nice to take a look at these ears, which I've done this fun thing where you should be able to wiggle the ears around. But now it is getting all of this head in there as well. So this should be a pretty obvious fix here. So what I'm going to do to fix the ears is I'm going to find my head. And I'm just going to come in and paint in that weight back in for the head, taking it away from the ears. If you did a face rig earlier, don't worry too much about adding weights from the head joint around the face because it seems to be already weighted to the head. However, don't subtract away from the face because that might cause some issues. Oh, this is interesting. It looks like I've made a mistake in my modeling. It looks like my ear is not welded to my skull. So I'm going to need to be kind of particular about how I weight these. So I want to make sure that all these vertices are perfectly weighted to the head. So I'm going to my vertex mode. Oh, wow, yeah, that whole ear is just not attached. That's unfortunate. So because of that, I'm going to have to make sure all of the vertices on this broken seam are all 100% weighted to the head so that there's no chance that they will separate if there's multiple influences acting upon them. Fortunately, this is on the head and not elsewhere, because on the skull, I can just weight it all to the one head joint, and I don't have to worry about multiple influences pulling those vertices apart. Yeah, unfortunately, I thought I had welded these, but sometimes, despite our best efforts, we still miss something. Unfortunately, it's probably a little too late to fix this. I could try later, but I have a feeling that would break my rig. So instead, I'm going to go in here, make sure all these surrounding vertices are painted to 1 as well. Or select as well. And I'm going to flood with 1 onto the head. And there we go. Then for ear 1, oops, go back here. For my right ear 1. Let's get rid of the last of this painting here on the outside. Ear 2 as well. Great, then for ear 1. Let's see how this looks. There we go. And you could hardly even tell that it's not connected. Well, you can tell a little bit because now I'm looking. There is a seam right here. So that's really unfortunate. We're so late into the rigging process that if I were to go back into my model and try to make that change, I might be able to fix it, but it might break my rig. And if it breaks my rig, it might not be worth trying to fix. So it could be a big issue. And if it's for this sort of project, if I can't fix it, it's not noticeable enough to really bother. These controllers for the ears are kind of huge. So I'm going to go into my body, go to control curves, and I can change the scale of these curves automatically by just inputting a new value here. And it basically multiplies the scale of that controller by the number I put in. So I'm going to hit scale, 0.3, that looks pretty good. And to make it bigger again, you have to do a value larger than 1. So I'm going to do there. Go to bind pose. Right. And then you can mirror those controllers from the right to the left. All right. We've done a lot of skin painting. We haven't done a lot of flipping. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my skin. Mirror skin weights. Repeat the same thing. The shirt. Pants. Everything should be feeling about the same right now. Check the other side. It's good. Ear's good. I'll check my face real quick. Once again, if you don't have a face, that's fine. It's not required to have a face. That looks good. Eyes are still looking good. Great, everything's still working. Go to build pose. Next, I want to check on this knife, because I know when I rotate this part of the body, the knife kind of rotates with it. Same with that part. So we really want this to be a uniform shape. We really want this to be weighted to one joint. I'm going to go back here, go to vertices, double click the vertices of these two parts because I left them separate. This will then be easy. Then I'll go back into my paint skin weights, go to replace, value of 1, and flood. I'll have to do that a couple of times because of the opacity. And there we go. Now the knife is behaving like a hard object attached to the hip as you would expect it to. Great. Go to build pose. So let's say you've got something loose like a tailcoat or something of the sort, just a loose piece of fabric that you want to have a little bit of control over. Thankfully, there's a solution for that. So in the body menu, I'm going to go down to custom controllers. I'm going to select my geometry and hit create soft mod. And from there, I can go in and select a part of my geometry. I'm going to select right here. And I'm going to create cluster control and give it a name like coat tail 1 and hit OK. And with that is created a little controller that controls just a part of my mesh. And I can go in and hit paint weights for second control. Make the influence a little wider. Place. Get rid of any influence on the other side. Close that. Then mirror the weights. Whoops. Go back to paint weights. Not very even, so I'm going to go to this side. It looks pretty good. You can rotate this, change how you want. And then mirror the weights over. And you can repeat this as many times as you want. So I'm going to create another soft mod. Put one here. Create cluster control. Coat tail 2. And boom. And you can do that along your whole piece of clothing. And then they move with your controllers. So you use these to sort of make corrections. And I'd need to go in here and paint these controls a little bit better. And there we go. So that's how you could go about adding just a little bit more clothing customization to your character. It would be quite an extra step, so it's not something you necessarily have to do, but it could be a nice detail. So now I'm pretty happy with where my rig is at. I'm going to go ahead and apply a test animation to wrap this up and see how it's all looking. So to do that, I'm going to go to Walk Designer and open that up. It's under the Tools menu. It's going to open up this menu. And from here, I can hit Start. And right away, it will start building out a walk cycle for our character. And with very little effort, you now have a walk. Right out of the gate. And then you can go in, use these sliders, change things around. With these sliders, you can add a bit more character to your walk. It's nothing drastic or incredible, but it's just something nice to test out your character a little bit without having to make a whole walk from scratch yourself. So go ahead and go through and play with the sliders to see what you like. There's some clipping. For example, with the arms through the legs. I wouldn't worry about that too much though. This is only a test after all. I can hit play down here at the bottom of the time slider just to see it in action. If for whatever reason your playing is going way too fast, you can go over here to the little man, the gearbox, and make sure that your playback speed is 24 FPS. Let's save and play. To get a better look at what your character is doing, you can go to Show, and you can hide nerves curves, and it'll hide all of these different curves. If you want to hide these spherical curves, you could also hide nerve surfaces. And now you've got just your character. Then once you're happy with that walk, you go down to Baking. I'm going to go ahead and check off loop animation. Instead, I'm going to change my loop to a set number of loops. 5 should be good. Then I'm going to go ahead and go to View and create a camera from the view, because I want to set up a whole render cam. I'm going to render a Playblast out to show as an example. So this is render cam. Show my resolution gate right here to know exactly what my frame will be. That should be good. I'll even go ahead and go into poly modeling, give myself a plane, press stop, and scale this plane way up just so that she has something to walk on. I'll add that to a new layer, get a reference. And while I'm making this nice, I'm also going to go over here next to my lighting, 2 over. I have the option to turn on screen space ambient occlusion. I'm not going to bother with actual lighting or anything like that, but turn on the ambient occlusion. Just lets me see sort of a near contact shadow. So I can see where she's stepping. I'm going to turn off my grid. And I'll lock my render cam in place with lock camera. I'm going to go up to my render settings. Turn on my resolution to a full 1080p. Close that. Turn off my resolution gate. Then I'm going to go to my animation menus. Also, I'm going to close advanced skeleton for now because I don't need that. I'm going to go up here to playback. I'm going to go to Playblast and hit the square box. It's going to open up this menu. I'm going to use the time slider time range, but you could also set your own time frame. You're going to turn up your quality to 100. This isn't going to be like rendering in Arnold where it takes forever. This is just taking screenshots, so you want as best quality screenshots as you can get. I'm going to turn your scale up to 1 and set your display size to from render settings. Make sure that save to file is set, and you can give your Playblast a name. Call it something like character rig walk Playblast 01. or whatever you want to call it. And I hit play blast. And it's going to run through and take screenshots of every frame. And then once it's done, it will pop up with the resulting video file. If your character's rendering too dark in the viewport, you could always turn off your textures. And then you should be able to just see them in a Lambert view. And go back up here, hit play blast. You don't need to press the square since you already set your settings. And it's okay to overwrite. And there you have it. Once you're done with your walk designer, you can hit cancel and close, and it will scrub the animation from your character. Next, I'm going to do a skinning test animation. And to apply a skin test animation, all I got to do is go to the animation tester. It'll pop up this window. And here I can input the rotations with which my joints will rotate. I'm just going to put in 45 and leave it at 5 frames. And I'll leave all these settings the same and hit apply. What that'll do is it will go through my entire rig and it will add rotating animations to all my joints so I can see every possible rotation that this character can have. And so we'll see how all my skinning is going. And it'll be a really quick way to see if there's any changes I need to make. And once it's done applying the animation to your rig, go ahead and go back to Play Blast, open up the settings again, and this time we want to decrease the scale a little bit just because of the length of this animation. Put it to about 0.7. If you get through your Play Blast and the Play Blast is corrupted, go ahead and make the scale a little bit smaller. This AVI format struggles when it gets to larger sizes. So to mitigate this problem, go ahead and set your scale lower if you run into issues. And then give yourself a new name. I've already put in Skinning Test Play Blast 1. And then hit Play Blast. And there's our animation. It's a little bit weird, but it lets us see what's going on. And I can see there's a few areas I would have liked to work on a little bit longer, but I'm happy with this for the demonstration. Great. I'm going to close that out. And I'm going to remove my body animation now that I'm done with it. And close up the animation tester. And just so I can see everything, I'm going to bring back my nerves curves and my nerve surfaces. Finally, all it's left to do is publish our rig. So we're going to go over here to publish and open up the window. And it gives us the option to set our display windows to reference, set our joints to hidden, and go to the build pose. And the last step is to publish. Now, it gives us a little bit of information about publish, which we should go over. So basically what publishing does is it's going to save a version of the rig where the model is not referenced. Instead, the rig and the character model will exist on the same file together, and then that can be referenced into another scene instead. Otherwise, if you were to reference the working rig, you're going to have the model referenced by the rig, and then that file is going to be referenced in the next file, and it's going to create nested references, which are obnoxious to deal with. So instead, if you publish your rig, you will have just one reference when you're working with it in animation. This also recommends that you save your rig file as an MA file, an ASCII format file. This is because when you hit publish, it's going to export a working rig file with the Maya binary extension. So if you haven't been working in Maya ASCII, go ahead and take the time to save a new version of your file as a .ma file. before you go ahead and publish, which will then spit out a my binary file. So go ahead, publish, and it is spat out a version of my rig that is clean and free of references. So I'm going to go to new scene, and I'm going to create a reference. And it's looking for my binary. I only have one. It is my new rig. I'll load that in. And there's my rig. Just turn on the textures. It'll take a second, but all the textures are there as well. It looks like I forgot to get rid of my image plane here for when I was working. And same with my render camera. So I save this scene as test scene .01.ma. We'll just save that for now. Open my scene. Open my character rigging MA file. Open that. And now with my previous scene loaded in again, I'm going to go to my perspective camera. Delete that render cam. Delete this image plane. I'll also go ahead and delete the skin curves from my skin cage. I'll go ahead and select the objects in my skin cage layer, and I'll delete that too. And I'll finally delete the skin cage layer itself. I don't need this head parts layer. I'll delete that. I'll leave the skeleton layer, however, and keep that invisible. Set my geometry to reference as well. I'll increment and save. Actually, no, I will save scene as 22. I'll replace my last file. And once again, repeat this as before and hit publish. Whoops. It's telling me that there's still some animation on my model, so I'm going to have to remove that first. Somehow the skin test is still on there, so I'm going to remove body animation. And now I will publish. Now let's save. Now let's open my test scene again. Because I published from the same name, it should have overwritten my last publish. And in test scene, all of my changes should have gone through. Yep, and sure enough, in test scene, that image plane is gone, as well as the camera. Now my clean reference character, ready to animate. So thank you so much for sticking through this whole journey with me. I know it's been a long one, and characters are not easy, especially in the beginning phase when you're first learning Maya. So serious props to you for making it to the end here. So with that, I wish you a good day, good luck, and have a good one.